Coming up on Theater Talk.
I was in Seussical. I was in
Another winner?
Yes, I was in a purple yarn suit sitting in a cage. And I said, I have to do something else. And so...
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. Well, it's the biggest hit show on Broadway. In fact, the biggest hit show Broadway has seen in years. We are very pleased tonight to have with us a key component of why this show, The Book of Mormon, is so good, and that is its terrific cast, every one of whom at this table has been nominated for a Tony Award.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Cheers, everybody. Where's the champagne? Well done, Nikki. Well done. And I just want to say, the last time we had a cast at this table that had all been nominated for a Tony Award, it was the cast of The God of Carnage. So very, very good.
Oh, that's very good. That is
cool.
good.
So I want to welcome to Theater Talk tonight Rory O'Malley, who is playing Elder McKinley in the Book of Mormon. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Josh Gad, who is playing Elder Cunningham.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to Theater Talk. The beautiful Nikki James. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I can't.
Very true.
I'm sure you all agree.
is.
Nikki James, who is playing Nabalungi. Is that how I pronounce
Correct.
it?
Yeah.
And the wonderful Andrew Rannells, I'm getting that correct.
Very nice. That's perfect.
Who is playing Elder Price. Welcome to Theater Talk, and again, congratulations on the success of the show and the Tony Awards.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that hair is really real.
That's my hair.
Yes.
There's no lace front.
There's nothing going on.
Water ski with it? No.
All right, guys, I'm curious to know, when did you begin to suspect, think, or know that the show you were doing was going to be a big old gigantic Broadway hit? Was there a particular moment?
2008.
Why do you say that?
Well, you know, Rory and I got started at the very first workshop and reading, whatever it was, however you want to call it.
Well, they're important.
Yeah, no, it was a reading. And thank you, Nikki. Yeah.
Somebody's the
Sorry,
equity
yeah.
deputy over here, right?
Apparently should have talked with Stuart Thompson Productions earlier today.
You get paid this
Like
for a
writing
reading
us,
and
yeah.
that for a workshop.
Yeah, so at the first reading, if you will, you know, we looked at each other and we're like, this is pretty remarkable. This has never been done. You know, we didn't know commercially how viable it was going to be, but we knew back then that it was something that we had to be a part
Doing
of.
it in front of an audience and having an audience react in the way that they did to the first 3 songs alone.
The first preview at
the first reading at the first reading 3 years ago was unbelievable because we didn't know. I knew that I loved the material and it was brilliant, but we didn't know if anyone had the guts to produce it or put it up, or you know, or what would happen once you get a real Broadway audience in front of it. So I don't think that any of us knew it would be this until.
Now, Josh, when you say this had never been done, define this for those people who haven't seen Book of Mormon.
Well,
what's
I mean,
what's the special quality?
I feel like it's, you know, it's taking Cats to the next level. No, I mean, this had never been done, meaning this is pretty demented material. What made it so special, and even early on we saw this, is there was this remarkable message. It had this heart to it that really, really transcended, I think, anybody's expectations.
I think all of us, and I joined at the next reading, which was in December of 2008, and they didn't give us any information. They wouldn't let me know the plot, or we hadn't heard any music. We didn't know the name of the piece at all.
Really?
They just
Top
said
secret kind
the
of.
guys from South. I don't think they knew.
They didn't know the name of the piece.
The South Park guys, along with some of the team from Avenue Q, are doing this musical. Are you on board for a quick little reading? And I was just coming back into town from being away for a while, and I remember thinking that I would, if they wanted me, I would do anything I had to do on my part to make sure that I could be a part of it, because there was something, and we do lots of readings and workshops and productions of little things, and there's a lot of stuff that's not good, and it could get there, and there was not a lot that's so good you can only imagine it's going to get better.
When did you come into it?
I did a workshop
I just did a workshop.
It was a legitimate workshop, by the
Yes,
way.
it was.
I want to tell everybody sitting at home.
Yes.
Andrew is correct in his analysis.
That's terminology.
I did a workshop. I joined last summer, last July. I was cast in like sort of early June, I guess, and then we started in July and did that workshop. And I completely agree. Like you read it and I felt immediately like I have to be a part of this. I really want to be a part of this, but you never know how things are going to go.
Yeah.
You never know how it's going to be received. And we had audiences this summer. We had invited audiences through rehearsals, but they were our friends. They were family.
Well,
they
tell
were
them about
industry people.
Sondheim.
Well, yes. I mean, Stephen Sondheim comes this summer, and Mike Nichols, and you look at the audience, you're like, well, this is amazing. But those are obviously like friends of ours.
they're
So it wasn't really until we did not the first performance, not the first like the gypsy run, the invited dress, but the first paid preview.
That's exactly.
That was like, this is the test.
Well, I want to ask you about that. What was it like to go up with this musical that has these songs that the lyrics of which cannot be on the Tony Awards? Was there any trepidation thinking, how is this?
You
1,800 people gonna-
terrified me actually, because you had written something about protesters and all of that stuff.
Yeah, Corpus
And
Christi.
and I, of course, and I'm thinking to myself, because I'm a hypochondriac to begin with. I'm like, I'm gonna walk out and get shot on the street. And but you know what? We all had that concern. We all had the concern.
Well, Scottsboro
Not
Boys
like
had
this
just...
Scottsboro Boys had protesters. So was
Yes.
there a concern that you guys would be?
Sure, because that was a show that, I mean, those protesters came out in large numbers, and they were very vocal, and that was all that was sort of being discussed. So, yeah, of course it was a concern, and we talked a lot about it as a cast, and our production talked about it a lot, the possibility of that, and luckily and sort of strangely in some ways, there hasn't been any of that.
Were you
with this
afraid of
show.
irate Mormons?
Well, not even Mormon so much, but I think that, and again, wisely, our producers were very wise to withhold song titles and lyrics, and I think that
No red flags out there.
no, things like that, things out of context look so much worse than it actually is in the show. So when people come and see it and they see the entire 2.5-hour musical,
If they stay.
and most
Which
of
we
them
weren't
have
sure
been,
at the
which is
beginning
great.
if they were going to
People
stay.
might get up in the middle of a number
But-
when it's offensive and leave.
But they're really great at like developing. They really sort of ease you into the shocking stuff, and it somehow doesn't seem that shocking.
It doesn't seem that.
Because they're so meticulous about the story.
Absolutely.
Although the
you
best
know,
part
earned.
is that the crazy people can't afford tickets anymore, so it worked out. Because they,
Only
Well, I do have to say, I was not scared, but it is unnerving to look out into the audience and see people go, you know.
You
and
say,
great and thrilling because you don't really see that a lot, and that's what's exciting for us.
But you get that. But then you get the laugh.
Yes.
And once you got the laugh, I would imagine you thought, it's
Yes.
going to be okay.
You know, I was talking with our creators, Trey and Matt. They did a little symposium yesterday, and we were in the audience. And it's really interesting to hear them talk about the material in that way. And you know, Matt said something, Matt Stone, he said, they get the joke. And people always say there's a coastal, he says there is a little bit of a coastal bias where we think America isn't ready for this. And the truth is, they are. If you're doing it well and what we're doing so well, people will get the joke.
And didn't cable, South Park and
Yeah.
cable really prepare them? Yeah.
people for it.
I think
Well,
so.
And the genius of the show really is that for all of the subversiveness, and we don't just mean in terms of the bad words, but also what it says about faith and religion, and a controversial take on it. But it's all done as Bye Bye Birdie. It is all done in the great tradition
Rodgers and Hammerstein.
of classic musical theater. So, all right, I want to talk about a friend of mine, and I know he's been over this production the whole time, and because I really think Scott Rudin has emerged as one of the great Broadway producers in the tradition of a David Merritt.
he may be the
Cameron
greatest
McIntyre.
living producer right now. He really may.
He is an intimidating guy, though. He's got a lot of power. What's it like when you're auditioning for a Scott Rudin, or when Scott Rudin's around you?
I don't want to blow his street cred, but I will. He's the nicest, friendliest man, and has made himself so accessible to all of us.
He came on after the very first reading.
Right.
Reading.
He wasn't reading.
He saw us all sitting there reading from the script and loved it. He came on and he literally threw himself into the creative process. And it was remarkable because he's not just a producer in how I think of producers is, okay, I'm going to be the guy who gathers the money, I'm going to get the investors. His creative voice is as strong and potent as any of the other parties. And he knows what works and what doesn't. And his caliber of movies proves that, his caliber of shows proves that. But with this, to see him working with Trey and Matt in a humor that is so distinct and so...
That's really theirs.
That's really theirs. And for him to get it and play with that and say, you know what, I think you guys want to take it this direction, 9 out of 10 times, it worked.
He allowed this show to have its unique journey. He didn't try to, put this show in some other show's box. We didn't do an out-of-town run. In fact, we did 2 full-scale workshops, which, for people who don't know, that's a lot of money to put out. It's 5 weeks of rehearsal, and we did costumes and sets for 4 little,
College kids.
Yeah, college kids, and he was really smart.
Steve Sondheim and Michael.
Right, yeah.
Nora Ephron.
The right audiences in, and it's been wonderful.
We'd also be remiss not to mention Ann Garofino, who's Trey and Matt's
Scott's partner.
Oh, I love her.
And I assume you're all angling now for roles in the various movies he'll be doing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Revolutionary Road 2.
Yeah. I'm gonna play an older, fatter Mark Zuckerberg in the sequel.
The Witches of Eastwick, kind of his big hit.
That's right.
First men's club.
Now, in terms of talking about Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who created South Park, they have openly admitted, that they approached this with some trepidation because they're not really musical theater guys. Did you see moments of nervousness on their part as they were putting it together?
Not really. I mean, I would say that Trey is definitely a full-on musical theater nerd. I mean, I know that he's seen Wicked and Jersey Boys more than I have. So I think that definitely it's a different element for them. It's a different medium, and I was just talking about this with some of the other cast, that they approach it with such reverence. They approach it with such respect. This is so special. Ann Garofino is so excited to be producing this, and they are so happy to be at that theater every day.
They're part of a family.
She saw it for the 20th time yesterday and still cried.
But they didn't come in as kind of like, we are monumentally successful in this other
Not
world,
at
and
all.
Broadway is a place
Wow.
that is just another place for us
There
to
was a lot of
Completely
humility in allowing Casey Nicholaw to co-direct and choreograph the show. I mean, I think that there certainly are strengths that Trey has, and then there were areas like choreography and staging that he wouldn't have been
That's
able
Matt's area.
to necessarily do. So the fact that Casey is phenomenal and came in and he brought sort of the Broadway magic that they needed. They needed somebody who could stage the hell out of this and who could choreograph it and could,
The lack of ego
Oh my
is
God.
shocking.
All of them
The lack
together.
of ego of Trey and Matt, and you've
really
never seen. They don't talk about themselves in a way, and I'm sure it was really challenging for them. I remember in one of the readings we'd done, watching Trey just pace back and forth. He was really wanting it to land.
That second one.
Yeah, he was so nervous.
So nervous.
Well, and they're used to performing their own
material.
So they're trusting
Yes,
us with
right,
these
right.
roles. So
And they have the secret weapon in Bobby Lopez, who,
That's right.
my gosh.
who they credit with saying, he's the guy who really knew how to make these songs Broadway style songs.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something. You guys are all young, and you all look like you just have come out of college and landed your first Broadway show. Being kind, Andrew. Unusual for me. This show, though, is such a hit. And the ticket prices, the premium price seats are like $425. The brokers are selling them for $1,000. It's not a show that any of you guys, when you were in love with the musical theater and trying to buy your tickets at the DKTS booth, could go to see. Does that bother you?
Not true.
You could do there's
The
a
lottery.
and I know Nikki and I both did this as like.
And I did a lot. I grew up in New Jersey, really close, and
Rent did it. They did
and
the
I
lottery
slept
for
out on the street to see Rent 50 million times.
Wow.
A lot of times. And so I think and we can say this on our show, I think what our producers realize is that we want those people to see it. So we do a lottery, and they also sell standing room tickets for not very much money comparatively. And we're also going to be doing a audience appreciation show on July 1st. So all of us will do a 9th show that week, and the tickets for the entire house will be lotteried off to our fans. So I think we want this show to be, you know, we love the people to spend a lot of money, more money than, I mean, I couldn't afford to see it now.
You guys have been priced out of your own show.
Sometimes I show up to the
but we
I'm like,
miss-
will I be able to afford getting on
Yes.
stage tonight?
But we miss and love, you know, those true diehard theater fans.
That you all are. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we've got to wrap it up, but Tonys are coming up. You've all been nominated. Are you nervous? Are you terrified? Are you sizing up the competition?
No,
you have a lock on it? You're ready to take that prize?
I'm so excited for that night. It's going to be the most amazing celebration to know that we went from that reading from 3 years ago to this night. It's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me, so I'm just going to enjoy it.
And Nikki, is that award yours? You're going to beat back the stiff
Oh my
competition
gosh,
from
if
everybody
I
else?
do, I guarantee you there'll be tears. I'm just excited to get to go to the big show. I've seen every single Tony Award that, you know, existed in the time that I knew how to turn on the television set a VCR, and this is my first time going, and going as a nominee is pretty sweet.
And you two, you're the sort of Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane producers. You're competing against each other.
A tie, how about it?
We're hoping for a tie, but the coolest thing is we're both nominated. It really is, because Andrew and I kept canceling each other out at all the other awards, and we were like, you know, we just want to be together at one of these things because we share, in a way, this role. Like it really is one role in two different voices, and to me, that's the coolest aspect.
It doesn't work.
I still think Daniel Radcliffe is going to win. I still think he's going to pull off the surprise.
Don't put it past him.
Yeah, he's got magic in him.
And the winner is Norbert Leo Butts, and there's no issue backstage. All right, pleasure talking to you all. The show is called The Book of Mormon, the biggest hit Broadway has seen, I think, really since the producers. Terrific cast, all Tony nominated. Thank you, Rory O'Malley, Josh Gad, Nikki M. James, and Andrew Rannells. 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 Never gonna get that right.
Rannells.
And if you can get into the Book of Mormon, don't miss it. And by the magic of theater talk, poof, we have the man who brought the Broadway magic that they needed into the Book of Mormon, the director and choreographer Casey Nicholaw, Mr. Broadway Magic himself.
Ah, shucks, thanks.
Welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank
Casey was also the choreographer of the wonderful Spamalot. He did Elf, which is another big popular show on
And The Drowsy Chaperone.
which is one of our favorites.
Thank you, me too.
Which you directed and choreographed that, right?
Yes, I did.
That's sort of that was kind of your breakthrough as a director.
That was it. The morning after Spamalot opened, I had the interview for Drowsy Chaperone and got it that day. So that was really cool.
Yeah, well, congratulations
Thank you.
on the
Thank
success
you.
of Book of Mormon, and a terrific job, too.
Thank you so much.
It seems to me that the challenge with this show was you have a controversial subject matter, dealing with religion, Mormons, faith, with a lot of language that, we can't air anywhere. And yet you pull it off because you make it a classic old-fashioned musical comedy. I mean, was that sort of the driving idea behind it?
I think so. I mean, Trey and Matt both have a love for musicals too, so they sort of came at it with that, like the Turn It Off number in Act 1. Trey said, I sort of, because I think it's strong comically, period, and Trey said, I think it's a tap number. And I actually hadn't thought of that. I thought, oh, yeah. And then, of course, my mind gets spinning. It's like, yes, it is. So it did. I think we all have such love for it. And, musical theater to me is it. I was that kid that had every program from everything I'd ever seen. And I just love it. And so, yeah, I think that was the whole plan, to take, contemporary humor and contemporary satire and put it in a traditional package. And even if they didn't set out to do that, that's how it ended up, and we all seem to be on the same page about it.
How do you and Trey work together? Because Trey Parker's co-director of the show.
Right. Really well, actually. When you sort of think about it, if you're going to have to do that, because I was a little trepidatious at first. I thought, how is this going to work? And then I met Trey, and we thought, oh, we're going to be fine. And basically, because we each had two jobs, because I was choreographer and director, and he was director and writer, it just kind of makes sense, because he spends his time in the writing room and I spend my time on stage doing the physical stuff, and then we meet in the middle and say, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? And he says, I think the number could use a little of this, and I say, I think the writing could use a little of that, and we just, sort of traded off in that way.
Now, whose idea was it to bring you on to the show? Because before, Jason Moore, who did Avenue Q, began the show, and then
Right.
he was gone, and you came in. Do you know who
I
brought you
came, my agents gave me a call and said that the team would like to meet with me because they were looking for someone to co-direct with Trey and to choreograph it. And I was in San Diego doing Robin and the Seven Hoods, and I said, great, that sounds fantastic. So I drove up on my day off and met them, Matt and Trey, and Ann Garofino is one of the producers, and we just hit it off. And then the next week, Bobby flew out, and we all just, Bobby Lopez, yeah, and we all just met, and I told them all my thoughts, and we shared things, and we talked about the numbers, and I said, how are you looking at these? And we just kept working.
What was the first number you staged for them?
The first number I staged was 2 by 2.
Right.
Which is the second number in the show, and it's really got the cheesy Up With People, Kids of the Kingdom choreography.
Right.
And it came so easily to me because that's basically what I would do backstage and in every dressing room as a performer. Just do a cheesy choreography
Cheesy
backstage
choreography,
to make people
just-
laugh.
What was the most difficult number for you to stage in Mormon?
Well, the most difficult number actually was All American, which is halfway through Act 1, and you have to get the whole story of Joseph Smith out so that the Act 2 will pay off, right? But it's one of those things.
It's expository.
Here
is the story of the Mormons and Joseph
Smith.
Smith.
2/3 into the first act is tricky for anything.
Yeah.
So we went through another number, and what ended up happening is Trey and I were talking, and everyone said, you know what? We should probably use our Mormon vocabulary. And that's when we went back to the 2 by 2 vocabulary to actually make that number
And
work.
explain what the 2 by 2 means.
Well,
in terms of the moment.
it's sort of, a very wholesome Kids of the Kingdom, Up With People-ish
Yes.
kind of choreography.
Yeah,
And that's what we ended up doing to tell the story. And then it's actually good because then when the Africans do their version of it, it's completely opposite of what you saw in Act 1.
Right. Now, you say you were the geeky show kid.
Completely.
Where'd you grow up?
San Diego.
And you went to, what, every touring show that came through?
Every show that went through, my parents would drive me up to Los Angeles to see shows at the Schubert and shows at the Pantages. And, my parents, it's fantastic because they really weren't theater people at all. And I really think about how did they know to do this? They saw that in me, and all of a sudden my dad went and bought season tickets to the touring shows through San Diego, and my mom bought me the Chorus Line cassette tape,
which you wore out.
I wore out, and then she let me and a friend get taken out of school on a Wednesday, and we drove up to see a Wednesday matinee and went to a cafeteria and saw Chorus Line. I was like, oh my God. And I kind of think, how did my mom really even know that? And it's
Have you ever asked them?
incredible. No, not really. We talk about the weather and how delicious the food is they're eating. So it's not like we haven't really talked. We didn't really
haven't had
talk
the heart-to-heart.
much about
How
it.
did
We
you
haven't
know
had the
that I was a
heart-to-heart.
show queen?
But it's pretty much, yes. Maybe it was the Diane Carol's Julia lunchbox that gave it away. I don't know.
Who were your biggest influences as director? Because you have such a wonderful theatrical inventive
And a
mind.
wide
Where did-
range
yeah.
of influences. I mean,
Well, I don't know. I think everything I've ever seen, basically,
together.
and I loved MGM musicals so much, that it really, everything musical. And I think I always just had this eye, and I think I was always a bossy kid. I remember, staging numbers to Disney movies when I was in elementary school and going to the principal's office and saying, can I take this and tour it room to room? That's what I think. How did I even know that stuff? I just always was interested in it and always loved creating, since I was a kid.
And you started out as a performer, though. I was looking at your credits. I
did.
didn't realize you were in some of my favorite shows. Steel Pier, Best Little Whorehouse
Oh,
Goes
your favorites, my favorites too.
I remember Best Little Whorehouse Goes Public. They had these plastic cubes with the raunchy prostitutes in it spreading their
Right.
legs, and you were.
I was pushing one of them and I was sitting on top of it while the legs were spread.
And when you were in a show like that, directed by Tommy Tune, who I think is a genius,
Right.
although he went wrong with that,
Right.
was the little chorus boy there watching Tommy Tune and thinking, someday I'm going to do it, and I know I can do it better
You
than
know
what's
what?
going on here.
Not always the better part, but I was always watching, and I think that's where I got my experience and my love for it, and I think it's where I really learned the craft of it because I watched the things I loved, I watched the things that didn't work, and I sort of was that person that would sit back there and go, I would do it this way, I would do it that way, that doesn't work for me. If they were going to structure it differently, I'd do that. And I did 8 Broadway shows, and 7 of the 8 were original. So I got to see that whole. I got to see all that. So it really was not a huge stretch for me when I actually started doing it because I really paid attention to it as opposed to just sitting reading magazines.
When does it come a point, though, in your life as a performer where you say, you have to make the decision, right? You can't keep going down the route of the performer if you want to try something else.
Well, basically, I can tell you exactly when it happened. I was in Seussical. I was in
Another winner?
Yes, I was in a purple yarn suit sitting in a cage, and I said, I have to do something else. And so as much as I loved that show and so much of it, it was not as satisfying to me as I would want it to be. And then I rented studio space between shows on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I just said, I'm going to be creative. I didn't know how. And the first few weeks I was sitting there eating my sandwich in a room going, what the hell am I doing here?
What were you creating? What were you
I didn't know. And then before I knew it, I got 25 dancer friends together. I choreographed 3 numbers, and I invited every writer and director and producer that I never met. And I spent all $4,000 that I had to my name.
Yeah, I was going to say you had no money then.
I had no money, and I rented studios at the Roundabout and did a presentation. I started getting work after that from that.
How great, how brilliant.
Just one last thing, though. I thought for a long time that great tradition of the director choreographer, Robbins, Champion, Fosse, Bennett, Toon, seemed to be over, but I guess you and Susan Stroman are the heirs to it, and you're keeping it going.
Really cool.
And that's the tradition that you grew up with and that you...
Yeah, and I mean, to be even talked about in the same sentence is pretty amazing. I idolized all of them and all of this. It really is pretty incredible.
You're keeping it going.
Yeah,
it's pretty incredible. It is.
Pretty great.
Well, I think you'll be able to rent studio space for some time to come with the success
Let's
of Book of
hope so.
Mormon. And I don't think you'll have any trouble coming to see what the next Casey Nicholaw project's going to be. Casey Nicholaw, the director and choreographer of the Book of Mormon, terrific show.
The co-director.
The co-director.
Sole choreographer.
Sorry, Trey, whatever his name is. We know who did the work. Man, Mr. Broadway magic right here. Thanks for being our guest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Great.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.